Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today we are going to discuss digital transition in newsroom. The lecture is part of your paper News and Society. The rise of digital technology and growth of telecommunication infrastructure is changing the global news industry. A recent study highlighted that revenue generated from the circulation of newspapers is now more than what it generates from print advertising as digital advertising grows at a steady pace. Simultaneously, proliferation of mobile devices and rise in access to internet has brought about new consumption pattern for large portion of readers. Web 2.0 or user generated content, internet communities, social media has brought challenges to new media themselves as once monopolized readers' attention is now have to compete with content produced by internet and social media users. In response to these changes, newspapers across the world are adapting their processes to accommodate challenges posed by the new media ecology. It is resulting in changes in the newsroom workflow, the role of journalists, nature of content, and modes of distribution. For example, smartphone enabled print reporters are capturing images and videos. Newsrooms are hiring developers and designers to create multimedia stories and new integrated content management system enabling editors to create for both print and digital as distribution consumption of news are increasingly happening on digital platforms. This transition is also changing the relationship between news producers and consumers. Consumers are no longer passive recipient of information. Now they have an option of engaging with content in multiple ways, and they also have the power to increase or deplete the value of the content. This new type of engagement is also enabling editors in the newsroom to anticipate content production and the timing of its distribution. While almost every newsroom, small or big, are making changes that allow them to make news for increasingly digital modes of consumption, the dynamics of this transition may be shaped by several factors like the availability of financial resources, access to skilled individuals, and of course, level of internet use and pace of adoption of their target readers themselves. Now, let us look at how newsrooms have evolved in the recent times. The basic role of a journalist is identifying, researching, and writing articles that contain information and tell a story. Although remain same, but how a journalist goes about it and what happens after the story is written have drastically changed. Earlier, a print journalist would spend time on the field gathering information to write the story add it to the content management system, sign out, and head home to come back next morning and then repeat the same for next assignment while the editor proofreads the story and publishes it in the newspaper. Also, a typical day in the newsroom began with a meeting to set the agenda for the next edition and ended when the paper went to press. But slowly, things have changed. The news outlets are no longer limited to producing content for a single output channel like print or television, but it includes publishing multimedia content for variety of digital offerings through the website, social media pages, and mobile applications, and maintaining these sites by live editing and audience engagement. This has called for additional skill sets on the part of reporters, editors, and in the newsroom as a whole. Also, news organizations have moved from a daily production cycle to a 24-hour news cycle. While this is not new to television outlets, for print newsrooms, this means altering their process, staffing the newsroom even after the paper has gone to press, and holding a series of meetings throughout the day to discuss the news agenda for their digital channels. Now let us look at the convergence and the expansion that has come with the digital medium. Convergence is a useful lens through which we can study transitions in the media ecology as a whole. The transition is led by explosion of options with respect to news gathering tools, storytelling techniques, narrative forms, and channels of distributions which have expanded the capabilities of a newsroom. Many newsrooms have also converged or merged previously distinct tasks, forms, and processes as a way to create an environment that can produce and distribute news successfully in today's dynamic media environment. In most modern day news outlets, we can observe these forces at play in four different areas. First is the content. As a result of technological convergence, editors and reporters have the option to combine different media forms such as images, videos, text, and audio in a single news package on their website to reach to their audience. Second is the journalistic capability. Earlier, the task of news gathering for a basic newspaper story was divided between the reporter who would conduct interviews and gather information and the photographer who would capture images. Now, it is possible for a single reporter with a smartphone to do both these things and also capture video or audio clippings at the scene. Now, a reporter with appropriate training can prepare many variations of one story and publish it on a variety of media channels. Third is the workflow. As journalists start creating multimedia content for not just one but a variety of different platforms, this puts immense pressure on the news process that is streamlined to serve one output channel, be it print, broadcast, or radio. This requires that the newsroom updates their editorial workflow to account for the new demands of their journalists as well as the audiences. This can include updating their content management systems to serve different media forms and output channels, expanding their teams to include designers as well as developers who can design multimedia news products. It can also include technological changes. Now, this change is also characterized by the influx of new technologies in the gathering, production, publishing, and distribution of news. This includes equipment for capturing multimedia stories, integrated content management software, audience analytics tools, and workflow management platforms. Now, let us look at the digital transitions and its impact in the Indian newspaper industry. According to Registrar of Newspapers in India, India currently has over 60,000 print newspapers in over 20 languages, with number of readers fragmented over 300 million. The sector is made up of large number of very diverse publications ranging from national dailies like the Times of India and the Indian Express, large regional players like Dainik Jagran and Malayalam Manorama, as well as local and hyper-local publications like the Bangalore Mirror and Adya Times. Over 90% of newspapers in the country are in Indian languages, and regional dominance is common not just for local language papers but also for legacy English newspapers like the Hindu, Hindustan Times, Deccan Chronicle, and the Telegraph, all catering primarily to audiences in their respective regions. Although newspapers are a thriving industry in India, newspaper organizations and journalists are adapting themselves to remain relevant in a fast changing environment. In some cases, these efforts may involve soft strategies like encouraging the creation of multimedia content, developing a social media strategy, but within the limitations of the extant infrastructure and practices of print newsroom. Whereas few organizations have undertaken a complete overhaul of the news making process to do journalism for the web. A 2016 study that documented how 3 print newsrooms were going about these changes discovered that while Indian newspaper organizations have similar goals, which are making multimedia content, engaging audiences on social media, directing traffic to their websites, how they went about achieving these were vastly different depending on how the organization prioritized these goals. The 3 organizations studied were first Dainik Jagran, Malayalam Manorama, and Hindustan Times. Based on interviews and observations of practices at the newsroom of these three newspapers, the study concluded a number of things. Now, let us discuss these conclusions one by one. Given that the Indian print newspaper industry is still growing, especially with respect to local language publications, these newspapers have the liberty of making changes from a position of relative strength, as they are still running on a profit from their print operations. This allows them the freedom to innovate and take risks and softens the blow of failure. However, this is done with the awareness that consumption of news via digital platforms will overtake that from print newspapers in the coming years. All three newspapers are proactively investing in digital media and have invested in new tools for news gathering, distribution, as well as measuring performance. They have trained either their existing staff or hired new staff to perform tasks that are required to maintain digital platforms and applications. While money can buy new tools and bring new expertise, to change culture and align the organization with the new priorities requires leadership, synergy between the management and the editorial, and collaboration between different departments within the newsroom. The transition involves a shift in organizational structure, editorial workflows, hiring practices, as well as the business strategies. The most significant barrier to collaboration has been perceived cultural and professional hierarchy ingrained in the newsroom that web journalism is inherently inferior to print journalism. Legacy media organizations genuinely have an edge over international publications and web native startups as a result of their network of reporters and stringers across their area of coverage, their brand reputation, audience reach, and editorial resources to stay ahead of the curve and compete with international news providers and web native startups within India. This legacy, however, can be both a blessing as well as a hindrance. Professional cultures and organizational structures established over a period of decades can be very hard to change, even with access to financial resources and a skilled workforce. Each organization has a different strategy that aligns with their editorial priorities and business goals. While Dainik Jagran and Malayalam Manorama build separate digital entities within their large news organizations, the Hindustan Times aimed to join their print and digital operations in a converged newsroom. Thus, the first two focused on an expansion into digital media by building new offices and hiring new personnel, especially for that, while the latter transformed existing assets to producing content for the web by equipping their newsroom with new equipment, updating their CMS, and training their staff in digital techniques. The changes are also reflective of who is pushing for them. At Dainik Jagran and Malayalam Manorama, it has been initiated by management who were looking to expand into new areas and capture the opportunities provided by a fast growing segment of consumers. While similar business goals exist at Hindustan Times, the change was led by senior editorial with a strong involvement from rank and file journalists in the newsroom. Now, let us try and summarize what we discussed in the lecture. The global news industry has undergone many changes as a result of the changes in the information technology and consumer electronics. A news outlet that used to serve one medium like television, print, or radio is now producing text, video, images, and audio content for their website as well as mobile applications. At the same time, a single news story can involve multiple digital media forms, demanding that journalists develop capabilities that allow them to gather and package multimedia content in a way that informs and engages the readers. Given the different elements that go into one news package and the fact that the internet news cycle runs 24/7, newsrooms have to streamline their processes and change their editorial workflow. According to a study conducted in newsrooms across India, these changes involve altering the organizational structures of the organization, changing the daily workflow of the newsroom, keeping the newsroom updated with the latest technology and software. Simultaneously, it also includes training journalists and hiring other skilled personnel. You also have to develop ways to track and interpret performance to inform decision making. We hope that this lecture helped you in understanding the transition in the newsroom. Do attempt the question in the self-evaluate quadrant, and for further reading suggestions, please refer to the third quadrant. Thank you.